All right, hopefully you can see my screen. So welcome everyone. I saw some familiar faces, but also some new faces. So if this is your first time coming to one of our meetings, welcome. We are the Hopkins Science Policy Group. We're a group of early career researchers, grad students, postdocs that are interested in the intersection of science and policy. And so I wanted to start, again, this presentation will also be shared, so no worries on remembering all the emails and everything. So I wanted to start with some Mentimeter, just to get to know everyone in a fast way. Feel free to use your phones to go to this QR code or just go to menti.com and add this code here. So there's just like a couple of questions. So we know where you're coming from Hopkins, and a little bit of the background that you may have on science policy. All right, I will go on the other. Hopefully you can see these. All right, I'm gonna start with a very easy question. How are you feeling today? It's Monday, but want to know how everyone is doing, how everyone's feeling, excited about Thanksgiving. And you have the code also if you were not able to come to full, amazing. If someone has eaten good, I haven't eaten yet, so quite jealous. Tired, I feel you. Awesome, so I'm excited, energetic, we love. All right. Seems like tired is winning. I feel like everyone can relate. All right, I'll wait for a couple more. Again, you have the code here. You can go to menti.com. All right, well, tired is winning, and I don't blame any of you. All right. Some of the questions, because someone already responded, I think. Which Hopkins school are you from? Usually we get a lot of people from School of Medicine and School of Public Health, but if anyone is part of another school, it would be amazing to see that we're reaching other parts of Hopkins. All right. All righty. And here's the big question. So here, we did this in the last general body meeting, but I know some of you are, seems to be the first time that you're joining us. So we want to know a little bit about your background on knowing what science policy is, careers in science policy, skills that you may need that you probably already have. All right. Oh, there we go. Last time we saw a lot of like middle ground of like not so sure. And this is one of the reasons why we decided to do this general body meeting, to kind of provide that info for the folks that may not know or may not be as familiar with policy. All right, pretty average. People are there like, know a little bit, not so sure. I think this may be actually the last one that I have. Oh, and what do you hope to learn today? And hopefully we are accomplishing that today. Also, if you're not hoping to learn anything, that is totally okay. Oh, I don't know what happened to that one. All right, what policy is? People seem to be excited to participate. We're hopefully gonna touch on those updates at the beginning. We have a lot of stuff that has happened this month, but hopefully things that you can participate in the future, how to become involved, what is possible. That's a great point. What is possible? All right, a couple more seconds if anyone wants to share. and then we'll get started. All right, healthcare informatics work and how policy makes an impact on that. All right. Well, this is open, so you can always add stuff in the future if we, you want us to touch on a particular topic. Feel free to, add whatever you hope to learn today or you want to learn in the future, and we get all that data later on, and it's very helpful for us. So I'll get started, and hopefully I can exit. There we go. All right. So I will get started on some of the stuff that we did previously. So some of the work that we want to do. So this month and last month, we did a lot of seminars, panels for, with the Professional Development Career Office. We've done a couple of panels on science policy fellowships and as well on science diplomacy. We're hoping to potentially start some of the seminar series that we're hoping to invite speakers to talk about specific and relevant science policy issues. Next year is an election day, so we're hoping that that can also help inform maybe some of the decisions, or seeing that intersection between science and some of the issues that are at stake during elections and also in non-election years. And in the spring, we'll talk now a little bit more in depth on this. We're working towards a science communication workshop series that is going to become that we're going to be able to provide a certificate of completion, so that any person that participates in this series can put in their CV in the future. We'll do some memo competition. We have some exciting science diplomacy projects, and we're hoping to also do some Hill Day later in the spring, where you can hopefully advocate for some of the issues that we're going to be working on in the spring. I also want to say that we're accepting blog publications. We have a blog in our website. If you are passionate about a topic, you want to write an op-ed, let us know. We're accepting submissions now. You can email. Also, that email is incorrect. Sorry. There we go. At our Hopkins email, or you can also email our blog editor, Morgan. They can coordinate with you, the topic, time of publication, can provide edits. So please feel free, again, to email us. We'll share all of these slides, so no need to remember these emails. All right, oops. There we go. And Stephen, I don't know if Stephen is here. I am not sure. I don't think so. So I can talk on this. So we are working, Stephen, our treasurer, and myself are working on a science communication workshop that we're hoping that it becomes, and yes, we can send the blog link at the end of the meeting, or if anyone in the site group can do that, that would be great. And so we're hoping to have these workshops starting in January, February, potentially ending in March. We're hoping that it's a series of 6-7 workshops that you can, if you participate in a majority of them, you can get a certificate of completion. We're hoping then to participate in the policy memo competition. So hopefully you can take some of the skills that you learn in these workshops to, find a topic that interests you and work on a policy memo that we're hoping to submit in the NSP and Jhspg competition. We've been last 2 years ago, we believe, we were able to get honorable mention in one of the submissions that we did. So, it's a competition that then gets published. So it's a great way to also get some publication in a policy journal. And later, we're hoping to then do an advocacy day based on some of the topics that you've, researched throughout the previous months, so that you can not just, work on writing something, but also be able to advocate for the issue that you're passionate about. Hopefully, we'll send the form to register for the certificate, hopefully before the end of the year. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to email us, and we are happy to meet with you and solve any doubts that you may have. Also, we're gonna get some details sorted out, so some of the questions may be resolved then. All right, Ona or Nate, if you want to talk on the science diplomacy stuff.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bernard. So everyone, we have sort of new updates about the Science Diplomacy Committee here. The first thing that we've done is a collaboration with the Science Policy and Diplomacy Group at University of Pennsylvania. And as many of you know, we had our first event with our international public health speaker, Dr. Sotelo, who has worked with the WHO for many years. So it was a really great talk. We learned a lot about what it feels like to work in these international bodies. So yeah, we're starting with that, and then we'll have at least 2 additional speakers. So be on the lookout for that. And then for the work that we'll do at Hopkins, Nate and I are planning to send out a short survey to you all, asking which global region you'll be interested in learning about, and then based on that, we'll be reaching out to relevant embassies in the region that's the most popular. So it's kind of going off of that, there will be definitely opportunities for involvement in the beginning of 2022 once we see where what embassies respond and what projects they have. So we'll be sending out definitely emails with kind of involvement opportunities. So that's short and sweet. If anyone has any questions, please reach out to me, Berna, or anyone. But yeah.
Yeah, so this will be a great opportunity to not just, we do a lot of professional development and workshops, but this will be a great opportunity to get some hands-on project involvement. And again, if you have any more questions, want to learn more, Ona and Nate are doing a great work on that. And as they said, expect a survey about this work in the future. All right. I don't know if Edwin is here. If not, I can also take this. All right. So this is the one-pager initiative that some other groups, hypergroups in the country have been doing. We're hoping to replicate something similar in Maryland. And basically what it is basically becoming some sort of science advisory board that, or kind of like experts that the Maryland General Assembly can, ask us for specific topic information, one page on COVID or on any other scientific topic that they may not know about, and that they would like some nonpartisan objective perspective on it. And so we're working to get some of the details sorted out. The legislative work starts in January, so we're just hoping to get that in place, and it will be based on requests from the legislators. So we're hoping that to gather a team of people that can hopefully generate these one-pagers, in the span of 1-2 weeks. But Edwin is the person who's leading this. Again, we're hoping to get some of the details sorted out. It's a little complicated. Also trying to convince Hopkins that this is something we can do. And so hopefully we can have, again, some kind of registration email for people who are interested in this. And again, if you want more details, feel free to email us about it. All right. And I think this is the last thing that we have. So we are currently accepting applications for communication chair and science diplomacy coordinator. The deadline is on Wednesday, I believe this is Wednesday at the end of the day. We'll share the link also in the chat, and again, we'll send these slides. You probably already received our email, but we'll potentially also email you all about it. So if you're interested, you may have some doubts, again, please feel free to ask us, and we'll share these. It's a pretty straightforward application. And again, you don't need to have a lot of experience. If you're passionate about, getting involved, that already gets you a long way. All right, and we have a question. Yes, so we'll actually send, we can send the link, and we'll also usually send the recording as well as the slides in a follow-up email to everyone. So you should be able to get that. So you can access, again, all the emails, all the links. So yes. Any other questions? If not, I will stop sharing because I think there's nothing else. And yeah, if there's no more questions, I would like to introduce Dr. Nick Montoni. They graduated from the University of Washington in Seattle with a PhD in chemistry. Their research focused on light and how it interacts with nanoscale metallic systems. Their first step into a science policy career involves translating science for policymakers at the Washington State Academy of Sciences and Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, both in Seattle, Washington. And following their work on Washington state policy, Nick moved to the other Washington for a fellowship in Congress, where they worked for Congressman David Price of North Carolina. It was there that Nick discovered a love for the federal budget process. Now at DC think tank Third Way, Nick still works on the federal budget, advising policymakers on how to make robust investment in clean energy technologies. So welcome, Nick, and feel free to start.
Well, thanks for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Montoni. You just heard all about me, so I won't say anything more on that. I will begin sharing my screen. Go. Can everyone see a PowerPoint with some dollar signs on it? Great. Well, I also want to gently encourage, but not require or shame everyone to turn on their cameras, but you also don't have to. It's just nice to see people's faces. So anyway, hi, I'm Nick Montoni. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit how I went from studying gold and silver metals to studying dollars and cents, not metals, sometimes metals. And that sort of policy journey and what kind of skills and activities sort of got me here. So to start, let's just do a quick review of some of the science I had to do in grad school. It seems like a lot of you are from the medical school or the public health school, so it's totally fine if none of this means anything to you, because a lot of it doesn't really mean anything to me anymore. But the point is, I think this is just really meant to highlight sort of the first skill that you're going to be developing in your grad school career, and it's the ability to ask a question and go about the process of finding the answer to that question. And sometimes in that process, you end up with more questions, and that's okay too. But that's really that's the key of research and the key of policy research is saying, okay, well, I want to know what happens when you shoot an electron past a golden triangle, right? And so you do the research to figure out the answer to that. And the same is true in the policy world. You might say, I want to know what the funding gaps are in our vaccine research in the United States. And you'll ask that, you'll talk to your contacts, you'll read some Congressional Research Service reports. We can talk about all that stuff, but you'll go about the process of finding the answer to that question, and that becomes, perhaps a policy memo or a legislative brief for a member of Congress or something of that sort. So the first and most important skill in science and in policy and in science policy is being able to do research. Now we get to the second skill. So in grad school, I did a lot more than just research. It's kind of annoying because grad school takes so much time. And I hate to be the person who's like, oh, just make time for things. But like, sometimes you just have to you have to pick your 100% things and pick your 90% things. And for some quarters in grad school, research was my 90% thing. So I could focus more on community organizing and coalition building. And so that was sort of, that's the second most important skill I think in policy is you have a thought or an idea or there's an important concept you want to explore, and you're asking, is anyone else exploring this important concept? Who else is exploring this important concept? Do we have the same ideas? Do we have different ideas? Can we get together and put our ideas together, put our heads together and come up with some policy recommendations, ideas, papers, whatever? So just some examples are working with Out in STEM, which is a group for queer students and staff and faculty. I put on a day-long symposium called Strengthening STEM Through Diversity, which was where we got all of the diversity-oriented affinity groups at the University of Washington to come together for a day and discuss like mentoring and management philosophies for students students from marginalized backgrounds, and how it's hard to navigate grad school and it's helpful when you have good mentorship. I also participated, it was actually back when I participated, it was called Women in Chemical Sciences, but then they had so many people who weren't women like joining and doing stuff. They were like, I guess we should just call this inclusion in chemical sciences because it's about more than just being a woman, which I thought was very cool of them. And also the logo is made of elements, so I like that too. So, and the Clean Energy Institute is sort of another, it's more research focused, but it's just another place where researchers from multidisciplinary backgrounds got together and did energy science together. And so this is really just to point out that, I just said the most important skill is research, but it's not all about research, right? It's about, can you bring people together to the table to talk about your ideas? So that was my grad school career. After grad school, I wanted to get more policy experience. So I took up internships and did some consultation at the Washington State Academy of Sciences, which is a sort of like the National Academy of Sciences, but for Washington State. There's actually a few in other states as well that you may have heard of. I'm not sure if Maryland has one. If they don't, that's something to think about. And then Pacific Northwest National Lab, I think if you all don't know, the country has about 17 national labs. 10 of them are Department of Energy science labs, 3 or 4 are Department of Energy applied office labs, and 3 are defense labs. Pacific Northwest National Lab is an Office of Science lab. It's really great. They have a state and local policy shop, and they have a federal policy shop. I worked on state and local. Also, please ignore any background noise. I have helicopters. I'm like right in the Marine One flight path or something, so I just get helicopters all the time. And then after that policy work at the state level, I went on to do a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship, which I'm sure many people have heard of. It's sort of the most prestigious one of the science policy fellowships that are available. I'm happy to talk more about it if you haven't heard of it. So this is the class I matriculated with. There are usually every year, there's about 30 congressional fellows, so fellows who go work in Congress, and roughly 200 executive branch fellows. And those are fellows who go work somewhere in the executive branch, maybe NIH, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, you name it, they probably have a fellow. And then for some reason, all the physicists, I'm like tangential physicist. For some reason, all the physicists wanted to take a picture together. I said, fine. I think they really just wanted my suit on camera, which is a fun suit. I wear it to weddings and also this. So now let's get to the meat of my interest in policy. And what I think is the most important policy angle is the federal budget process, the appropriations process. The federal budget is set by a pair of committees in the House and the Senate called the appropriations committees. And they write the yearly funding bill. Well, normally it should be 12 bills. Every year we've had one yearly funding bill because we put it together in an omnibus, and every year it has come late. So we can talk more about the specifics of this process if you want. I think it might not be that interesting. But what do I mean when they say, normally it's 12 bills? Well, each of these committees in both chambers has 12 subcommittees. And the 12 subcommittees each handle a different slice of the federal government and fund that part of the federal government. And the ones that are usually the most interesting to me are agriculture, energy and water, and interior and environment. These are the ones that handle most of the energy and climate funding. Sometimes the commerce, justice, science one also does, and I've also dabbled a bit in the defense one because they have a couple of energy buckets of funding. these bills aren't just there. Like people don't just, luckily, we don't just have like a couple of political talking heads like writing these bills in a vacuum. They're actually constantly, I would hope, hearing from their constituents and stakeholder groups. And so this is sort of a two-directional point I want to make about what kind of skills are necessary for you doing science policy. Is right now, as grad students, you are subject matter experts. So when you go to do your Hill Day, you should be going to offices who have control over the things you're interested in and telling them what initiatives, what funding, what bills are important. So for instance, when I worked on the Hill and I worked for Congressman David Price, he's a Democrat from North Carolina, and he represented at the time Duke University, the University of North Carolina, and North Carolina State University, which are like the three biggest research institutions in that state. And so they came to us all the time to tell us what kind of funding is important. And the reason I brought up this example, the Climate Adaptation Science Centers, is because one of them is headquartered at NC State, and because it's one of the bills I worked on, and I actually made sure that they got a funding increase the year that I worked on that bill. And so that's just to be an example of, if people from a stakeholder group like Climate Adaptation Science Center come to a member of Congress and make a very clear ask and very clearly articulate what they want and why, that helps them get it, right? I helped them get a funding increase for this office, and that's a pretty big deal. So you could be the people who help get a funding increase, and if you go get a congressional fellowship, you could be the people who help make sure the funding increase gets into the bill. Oh, there's like lots of other cool things that you do when you work in Congress. I wrote that tweet that Congressman David Price tweeted out. And this is me meeting with the Citizens Climate Lobby. They were nice. And then this is like the worst bird in the world. This is the greater sage grouse. And like every year, there's like some provision in some bill that like, I don't know, like keeps them on the endangered species list, or like prevents something from like encroaching on their territory. It's all very important, like conservation, like biodiversity stuff. I'm not saying that's bad, but in all the lobbying like materials, like they send this email and it has a YouTube link to this bird like doing its mating dance. It's horrible. It's just horrific. Like very evocative, I guess. So I highly encourage you to Google the greater sage grouse. It has become sort of the most notoriously annoying bird in Congress. But I so support biodiversity and conservation. It's very important. The bird just gets on my nerves. Oh, you also meet cool people. So that's me. That's a picture. It's a really low quality picture. I'm so sorry. It's a picture with me and David Price and former Secretary of Transportation and Mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina, Anthony Fox. That's pretty cool. And I also met Al Gore. So this has turned into, what are the skills you need to do science policy, to if you do science policy, here's all the cool stuff that'll happen to you. So I want you to keep that in mind. So after Congress, I moved on to this think tank in DC called Third Way. They have a ton of work area buckets. They work on national security and education and politics and social policy. I don't do any of that stuff. I still do climate and energy, thank goodness, because it's my favorite stuff. And so here's just sort of a small sample of stuff I've worked on. I'm still, staying very up to date on the budget stuff, talking about how different funding initiatives go hand in hand. I started working a bit on clean energy entrepreneurship and the startup world and clean energy tech. So talking a little bit about how the government can actually make entrepreneurship easier for people who aren't white dudes, which is very important. And I've also been working on this small and cool office in the Department of Energy called the Loan Programs Office, which is actually sort of the most important piece of the government's ability to deploy clean energy. They are sort of the leading office in ensuring that people who want to actually build clean energy projects have the capital to do so. So they're overall a pretty good office, and they've had a pretty big impact on climate so far. And then finally, to keep talking about the LPO, this is just a fragment of bill text. You don't have to read the text. All you have to know is that there's a funding number somewhere in there. It's like, I can't find it now. It's like 3 billion. But I advised on that number. 3 billion is something that I helped get into this bill. So even though I'm not on the Hill anymore, I still have an ability to communicate, to ask questions like, what kind of funding do we need to fill in this gap? And then to communicate those results to the people who make those decisions. And more stuff. So here are the important SciPol skills we've sort of talked about. One we haven't. I didn't bring up research again because I think that goes without saying. You're all scientists. You want to do science policy. You're all scientists or science adjacent. You know how to do research. You know how to ask a question and answer it. But I think the other important skills are communication, right? It's not enough to be right about something. It's not enough to know the answer to something. You have to be able to tell a good story. I had a mentor when I worked at Pacific Northwest National Lab. Anytime I was writing a policy memo, she would like stop me and she would just say, start with the why, right? Don't tell me like, oh, 50% of solar panels are defective. No one cares. No one knows what that means. Like, start with a compelling anecdote or a compelling statistic. Start with a really good story. Start with a success story. Don't start with like boring data or like, anything. Don't start with anything dull. Don't start with anything that'll make someone's eyes glaze over. Hopefully I'm not making your eyes glaze over right now. And so I think that's, I want to like harp on some of the things that came up in your meeting. I saw that like science communication workshops, absolutely do those, because that's what's going to help you. Like science communication is like basically the same as policy communication. No one will tell you that. A lot of policy and science people don't want to admit that. It's basically the same. Like you're learning how to translate something that's, super in depth and almost impenetrable, and you're learning how to explain it to someone who doesn't understand it. So highly encourage you to do as much science communication work as you can. The other skill is coalition building. So like I said, in grad school, I tried to do a lot of work bringing people together to the table to talk about our ideas and come up with sort of, ways forward, guiding documents, priorities, baselines, that whole thing. And I even do that now. With my work at Third Way, we work in a couple of different coalitions and groups. And sometimes, we are I'll be openly political here, we are a democratic think tank, and we often work with people on the other that help us get our job done. And we can help them get their job done. So it's good to be able to work with people that you disagree with. That's not, a caveat on that is like, if you disagree with someone about like whether or not you deserve like basic human rights, then that's like not a disagreement you should try to bridge. Like they're just wrong. But when it comes to like sort of high level policy things, you should try to work with people you disagree with. And then the last one that I haven't really had too much of a chance to talk about is accepting learning from failure. So I think the point of science is to be wrong, right? It's to like get something wrong, get something wrong a million times until you get it right. Or to get something wrong, but you start a good conversation in the literature and you and some other collaborating scientist eventually figure out the right answer. I think the same thing, there's not a lot of room to be wrong in policymaking, right? If you're wrong in policymaking, you hurt people. So you have to be careful. You can't make the wrong decision, but you can have bad ideas. So it's okay to have bad ideas because someone will set you on the right path, or you'll have a good conversation about it. And similarly, you should have patience for people who have the wrong idea, because you might learn something from it, and they might learn something from it. So I think it's okay to fail. That's what I'm trying to say. You should learn how to fail, which is sort of like was my mantra in grad school. Oh, this is old. I should have changed this. Let's go back. don't look at that stuff. I'll get you my contact info later. That's it. It was that was just like sort of a stream of consciousness presentation. Like there's no actual like content there. So please do ask me questions. And I mean, you can like raise your hands if you want, but it's probably like way more useful if you just yell. Yeah, go for it.
I do have a question. Oh, sorry, Nate, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Bernat. What my question would be, in your PhD, you've gone through it as well. There's those moments where you're like sitting at the bench or sitting at your laptop and you're like incredibly frustrated. Your experiments failed for like the 5th time. And you're like, why am I doing this? And I was just curious what those similar moments were through your career path in science policy was.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I mean, like constantly, right? That's just sort of like the life of a PhD student, and also the life of a policymaker. I mean, some instances, of course, in grad school where, an experiment's not working, or a collaborator's not getting me the data I need, or a collaborator is getting me data and like with the like just terrible analysis that doesn't make any sense, then I'm like, we can't put this in our paper because it doesn't mean anything. Like we really need to rethink this. So I guess those moments in grad school when it happened, why am I doing this? That's hard because the advice is, like, why are you doing it? Well, if you need a PhD for the career you want to do, then you should get a PhD. And if you want a PhD because you want to, add to the world's knowledge, then you should get a PhD. And so that's like really what I came up with. I was like, okay, why am I still doing this to myself? Well, I want to go into science policy. I don't know too many people with a master's in chemistry, who do science policy. Like they all have a PhD. Like I want to be taken seriously and be seen as an expert in my field. So I'm going to get a PhD. Kind of a cynical and self-serving motivation, but whatever gets you through it. In the policy world, the challenges are a little different because you sort of like run into this problem of like the intersection of policy and politics. And so like when I started in policy, I guess like, let's say when I started on the Hill, right? When I started on the Hill, I was working for a member, a very senior member of Congress whose political party controlled one chamber of Congress, but not the other chamber and not the White House. And it's just sort of like, you see like statements and initiatives coming out of those other places. And you're like, wow, why are we doing policy again when like these other people control the world and they like don't agree with us fundamentally? And it's very disheartening. And I think the answer is you say like, well, luckily we are in a position where we can have an impact on the world here. Like we can have an impact on the world. We can put our ideas out into the world and we do have a say in the conversation. And so it's frustrating. It makes me want to quit, it makes me want to throw my laptop out the window sometimes, but like there's always, even in a political, like I'm not going to assume anyone's political leanings here. I'm being a little unfair. But even in a political situation where like you aren't in control at all and your policy ideas sort of, have no traction, like there's still ways for you to make your voice heard and still ways for you to influence the conversation. And I think remembering that is how you get through sort of the tough moments in science policy, is you remember like, okay, someone wants my expertise, someone wants my ideas, and there are avenues for me to share those. And even in the most bleak of political situations, like we've seen bleak political situations, and multiple times in the past decade. And luckily, for better or worse, one of the two chambers of Congress is not a majoritarian institution. So those who have less power in that institution can still impact legislation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.
There's a question in the chat, which is very similar to one that I was going to ask, which says, how do you decide what area of policy you are interested in? Do you have to specialize in a particular area, or is it common to switch between areas, which is one of the things that I was going to ask.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, so, my PhD research really lent itself to like energy type science because I studied light, and that, sort of directly goes into solar energy. So I just sort of like kept on that path. And, I've always been sort of a tree-hugging liberal, so it just kind of fits that I should like think about clean energy and climate. But here's the thing, right? First of all, just like when you do a PhD, you're not like locked into any career choice, right? So you can always change. You can always change paths. You can always change tracks. You can always work on something new. It really depends like what kind of experience you're looking for. So when I went to work in the House, the thing about working in a House member's office is that they're notoriously and ridiculously understaffed. And so every staffer there has about 5 or 6 portfolio areas. So, I went in like, okay, I'm good at energy and some like climate and environment stuff. And they said, great, you should do that. And also agriculture and nutrition and telecommunications and some healthcare and, and science and like maybe a little national security when it touches on nuclear energy and et cetera, right? And so, it depends, right? Do you want an expansive, inclusive experience of lots of different policy areas? Then you should be looking at opportunities that allow you to be a generalist. And then if you become a generalist, it's much easier to like jump off, I really enjoyed doing telecom, my PhD is in clean energy, but I really enjoyed doing telecom policy. So I'm actually going to go work on that more. I'm going to go work for a nonprofit that does that, or I'm going to go, work for whoever, a telecom company. But on the other hand, if you really like what you're doing, right? Some of you are doctors and public health researchers. So if you really like doing like health policy, then you can go work in the Senate or go work for a health policy nonprofit and like just focus in on that. And that's great. Like you decide based on like what's your area of expertise and what's your interest. And people don't turn away PhD scientists usually. So you have a lot of opportunities to like really decide and expand what your portfolio is.
So I have a question. As a person who is not American, but also wants to understand science policy better to hopefully maybe take these skills one day and take them elsewhere in the world, do you think the opportunities that you got the chance to have are easily accessible to non-Americans?
Yeah, that's tough. And I actually think that I know Bernat has worked on a lot of these things, so he might actually be able to answer these questions better than me. But the answer is, some are and some aren't. So a lot of my opportunities have been career focused. And so, if your ability to get a job is dependent on your ability to get a work visa, or these are jobs that, won't accept certain work visas, then that's tough. And I don't have an answer for you, I'm sorry. But I think like a lot of places, like Washington State Academy of Sciences, or whatever the state level equivalent would be in Maryland or wherever else you happen to live, they do like internships and fellowships. So things that you could do while you're in grad school that maybe don't require as much paperwork. So those are good opportunities. I think like a lot of, I think a lot of the things that you brought up in your meeting earlier, doing like Hill Days, right? That's a way to build these experiences. Doing SciComm workshops. I wrote a few more down. There was another, science diplomacy stuff. Like that's a good one because it helps you build those skills, but it also helps you build those skills internationally. So then you are building the connections that you might need when you want to take these skills elsewhere. So I think science diplomacy is a really good thing to focus on if you're interested in that international aspect. And the last thing to say is, I don't know about like other countries' governments and how they fund or employ scientists and what kinds of nonprofit situations they have there. But I do know that a lot of embassies and consulates have science advisors and science people. And so again, it might depend on what kind of visa you can get and what kind of visa they accept. But those are other opportunities to get these experiences and then take those skills elsewhere. So I know like one person, I know someone at the UK consulate, but I think like every consulate has a science person, or a few do. So there's opportunities there.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
I do have a question. So you talked about working with people that disagree with you. And of course, not on basic human rights stuff, but
right.
If you're talking, say, especially doing energy and climate stuff, can you talk about how do you talk with people that disagree with climate change, yet still try to push, for policies that are beneficial or like that tackle climate change without potentially saying the word?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, so like language and message matter, obviously. And so like, yeah, you have to be careful, and you have to think about like, what's the disagreement about and what's the outcome, right? If you're talking about people who like deny the reality, deny that climate change is a reality, that it's happening and it's dangerous, and don't want to do anything about it, well, these are unserious people. Like, you shouldn't ever work in a way or with people or on a position that is contrary to fact, right? You don't have to support contrary to fact positions. And I would never encourage you to do that. And I don't think any science policy person would encourage you to do that. Now, if they maybe like they don't want to talk about climate change in public, but they think we should invest in clean energy, and they think we should invest in removing carbon from the atmosphere, and they think we should invest in more resilience for communities that will be impacted by climate change, not because climate change is real, but just, oh, look at all those hurricanes going through. That's where there's room to work with people, right? You don't have to agree on the motivations necessarily, but if you agree on the outcomes and the policy provisions, that's where there's opportunity for overlap. And so that's what we look for.
There's also a question on the chat saying, did you consider an executive branch AAAS fellowship? And did the legislative position better match up with your skills and interests?
Yes, great question. I did, oh, sorry, let's put that, you don't need to see that. I did consider, I considered the executive branch fellowship. I think, as you all have now heard, I speak very politically. The congressional fellowship allows you to be a political operative. You are working for a political, in most cases, right? If you go work in a committee, it's a little dicier. If you go work for a member of Congress, you get to say political things, do political things, meet with political actors. It's a good way to figure out, like, how does politics influence the process of policymaking, and how does it influence the process of using science to inform policy? And I think those are interesting questions. And also, sometimes I like writing tweets that are mean about politics. So it's just it's just a nice overlap. So yes, I think the legislative branch definitely matched with my skills and interests a lot more. The executive branch is also, it's much less about like, well, I guess I shouldn't be too prescriptive about it because I haven't done it. But you don't get to be, it's not political, right? And I think it's less about like the process of crafting a policy proposal and more about the implementation of that policy proposal. And so implementation is important, but I'm like much more interested, I was much more interested in how do we like direct, right? What's the, Congress is the Article 1 body. It tells the government what to do. That was interesting to me. The executive branch is the Article 2 body. It does the things that the government is supposed to do. That's also interesting, but like not as cool. But if it's cool to you, great, you should do it.
I do have another question. I know we have like 5 minutes, but
Thank you.
The question is, let me see if I remember now. Oh God, no, I forgot. I need a minute to think about the question, but if someone else has a question, please ask it now. Yes. Oh, sorry, I got it. Which is, we talked a lot about like science informing policy, but can you talk about how maybe science doesn't inform, like the other considerations that policymakers have, and why it's not always like, I don't want people to take away like, oh, everyone's going to follow science, and like we're going to come and say a scientific fact, and everyone's going to be like, oh my God, we're going to follow that because science. Can you talk about how that isn't always the way, and like how do, again, how to put science onto the table, even if it may not be a priority for people?
Yes. So Bernat raises a great point, which is sort of a little mantra of mine, which people don't always like to hear, especially scientists and people who do science stuff. There are dozens of inputs into the policymaking process. Science is one of them, just one, right? What are the other inputs into the policymaking process? Well, we've already talked about one, politics, right? Constituent opinions, values, economics, stakeholder input, campaign donors. Like, let's be real. There are a lot of inputs into the policymaking process. It is not just one thing. And so I think when you are doing science policy, you should not be saying, oh, like, science is the most important thing, and like we should do what the science says, because like, yeah, okay, the science doesn't prescribe policy solutions or provisions. Science allows us to ask a question about the physical world and determine an outcome or determine a possible path forward, right? There's no, this is like, I'm gonna maybe piss someone off. When people say like, oh, the science says we have to stop fracking. Well, it doesn't say that, right? It says we should stop putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. It says that the process of fracking can result in earthquakes. It says that the process of fracking can result in polluted water. Those are bad outcomes. Those are outcomes we want to mitigate or avoid, certainly. But science doesn't say stop fracking, because science doesn't, that's a value statement. That's like, science doesn't tell you to stop fracking. Policy could tell you to stop fracking, right? If all the constituents in a neighborhood who are near a fracking operation say, hey, our water is poisoned, please stop fracking, that says stop fracking. That's fine. So this is just one example, right? I'm not arguing for or against fracking. I'm against it. But I think that science doesn't, you have to weigh all of these other, whether or not we stop fracking, whether or not we embark on a particular policy implementation or particular policy provision is up to more than just what the data say. It's up to what the community says. It's up to what our politics say. It's up to what economic data say. It's up to whether or not you have the votes. Like, just because something's the right answer doesn't mean you're going to have the votes for it, unfortunately. And I hate to admit that sometimes, but it's true. That's how it works. So I think like you should be bringing science as one input into the conversation and not being too disheartened when people ignore it.
Fair.
Not that they might not necessarily, but they could.
Any other questions for Nick? I know they just dropped all the info.
I talked so much.
Hey.
You can, there's a lot, if you want to talk about the budget process too, I'm happy to, that's my favorite thing. So happy to talk about that. But we're at 12:58, so I'm also happy to let you all go live your lives.
I want to say thank you so much for the presentation. It was amazing.
Happy to help.
All right. And just a reminder, we'll send the link to the presentation, the actual presentation, and the recording for those who had to live in the middle or maybe joined in the middle. So there's all the information about the events that we're doing. Expect emails with registration for science communication workshops, for science diplomacy projects. So just be in the lookout. If you are not part of our listserv, feel free to email us, and we can add you to that. So, all righty, sounds like a plan. And thank you, Nick. All right, bye everyone.